live.
We're live.
All right. We did it.
Welcome back. Another week, another Gen XYZ, and another round of introductions, which Peter likes immensely. So, Peter, why don't you begin? Go ahead and you introduce yourself.
I am Peter. I am the host of your show. I am millennial and the Gen Y, and I know everybody's here to watch me. So there you go. There's my introduction.
As a millennial, it is all about you.
Yeah,
we know that.
All about me.
Host of the show.
It's my world. You guys are just living in it.
He's not even the co-host at this point. He just is a host.
I've promoted myself.
Ashley, where's a boo? Can we boo? Can you boo him?
Extreme loud boo, because you don't even have. I'm pretty sure you don't even have like recording privileges that me and Pete have. So technically, you're just a guest.
I just clicked.
Not even an admin on the account.
He's not.
That's true.
So.
Perfect.
As a Gen Z, I'm good with technology. I set that up to make sure that you were just a guest.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
yeah.
the technology, yeah.
So now that we know who the Gen Zer is as well, I'm Pete. I'm the Gen Xer, and today we're going to talk about we're really going to separate the generations today because we're discussing the challenges each generation faces when searching for a job. There's a lot of job seekers right now, more than we'd like. Yep. We spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and we see the news, even more layoffs this week, you guys. LinkedIn laid off, I think, 700 people. Yeah. So that's not good. We don't like seeing that. But let's talk about these challenges and how severe we think they are, and if we can offer any advice on how to overcome these challenges, that'll be our goal. And if you are watching us, please ask questions. We like jumping in on different topics as we go, so feel free to chime in. We appreciate the participation.
Yes, we will do our best to give advice on different subjects. So which generation are we starting off with?
Let's jump over over me and go right to the baby boomers, of which I am not one, and talk about what challenges they have. And we had Josh Hammonds on last week talking about burnout, and Josh pointed out something that's, I think, so relevant for all of our discussions, which is it's not necessarily because of the generation that they exist in, but the age of the individuals. So when we're talking about baby boomers in terms of job searching, ageism is sort of the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of what one of the top concerns older people have when they're looking for a job. They think that they're going to their age is going to be used against them. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think that's a fair concern. I mean, baby boomers, whether you call whether it's a baby boomer issue or a issue to people who are getting to the age where they're retirement age. I think that's going to be a concern. If you've been doing something for 20 years for a certain way, an employer, or your coworkers, it's legitimate to say, hey, I might be perceived a certain way just because I've done something this way and I can't learn a new way. I think it's relevant. It's definitely it is a thing, and it's a thing that a lot of people, older people in the workforce do have to deal with, I think. So I think that's the main one. That's definitely a legitimate concern. So
yeah, I definitely would say it's like ageism. I remember when I was back in college and, I had my graphic design professor. My professor was saying that like a lot of the times in the graphic design world, the older you get when you're trying to find a job, the harder it is because they want the younger ones that are coming fresh out of college, fresh with new ideas and fresh ways on how to do graphic design. So I think it's definitely an age thing.
Yeah, and when we're talking about baby boomers now, we're essentially talking about people who are either close to 60 and up, and that is it's a real thing to be concerned with. I don't see it playing out in the job market. So I come up with all of these thoughts from my career in recruiting. I mean and I think the limitation has more to do with income expectations than it does age, and that's real. Right? Because you have to have a job at a certain level that you're accustomed to. If you have 20, 30 years of experience, you're not going to take a low income job. So I think that's where the challenge comes in for, is not because of the age, it's because of the experience level and the seniority and the income that comes along with it.
Well, so then I've seen online, if you want to, you know, I've seen it portrayed both ways. But if you want to look at like the negative ways that people say that, you know, and it's, you know, certain employers, they want people that they can kind of do their own thing, like make, you know, you got to go to client meetings all over the place, and you got to, you know, make, like you said, you got to, we're going to pay you less and stuff. And that's not the case, obviously, with all employers, but there are some that are like, I mean, they want people that they can, you know, kind of boss around, you know, push around a little bit, and older people who've been in the market, they're like, I know my worth, I'm going to push back a little bit. Whereas somebody right out of school maybe doesn't know any better. And, you know, it from a negative point of view, they can be pushed around. They don't know what's good, what's not. From another point of view, like an employer might want somebody just who's flexible, who doesn't have kids at home, who doesn't have, you know, a family, and they're settled and everything. They want somebody who can work, you know, long hours, or, you know, take a flight to go meet a client on the other coast at, you know, at last minute. That's not necessarily something that somebody later in their career is going to want to do. You know, they're not going to want to climb that ladder, so, you know, so to speak. So I think that's a thing that I've seen a lot with people talking about beyond just like learning new things.
Well, if we want to find a silver lining there, and so there's a lot of things that come to mind in this discussion that are discriminatory in nature, that no one should consider when recruiting and interviewing. But we also know there's reality that comes into play once someone's in a role. And like you said, someone with kids can't pick up and just leave on a dime. And so that is perhaps an advantage to older people, because they're empty nesters and they can do that. So if you don't have, I mean, I'm a few years, unfortunately, away from my youngest being out of the house, and my availability is going to increase greatly the day that happens, for all the wrong reasons, but it's a reality of the situation. So it can be a silver lining. What other things do we think that baby boomers should be concerned with right now who are on the job market?
Before we jump off, do you think that there's a kind of the flip side of that, is that a baby boomer could be, you know, baby boomers, and I'll even lump in Gen X and like people more stable in their lives are going to be more stable in their job. They're not going to have, you know, an employer doesn't have to worry as much about them being job hoppy. Like they're like, hey, this person they're here for the long haul type of thing, versus, you know, some of the younger generations. I know that that's kind of a concern.
You know, I just think it's so much about the individual, and any scenario you could come up with, you can almost find the counter to it, you know, based on someone of the same age, just in a different situation. So some people have a willingness to travel and leave on the fly. Other people are homebodies who don't want to leave ever. So I don't know that has to do with age as much as just who the person is and what their lifestyle revolves around. But and one of the things that gets talked about a lot, of course, with baby boomers is a technology gap that exists in not having current skills. So Ashley, you know, started off talking about that. So Ashley, why do you think that your technology skills are more evolved than someone, let's say, who's in their 60s?
I feel like someone in their 60s, they didn't grow up with technology. Like 3-year-olds nowadays have an iPad, know how to work an iPad. And at 3 years old, a baby boomer did not have that. So I feel like things are just advancing really quickly and constantly, that I feel like they're going to have a struggle trying to keep up unless they really put in like an effort, or they might not understand. So I feel like, again, let's just say Chat GPT, probably many of them don't even know what that is, especially if they're currently not even in the workforce.
So we're talking about specifically like digital technologies are like, because you could argue that, you know, a mechanic who's a baby boomer has been working on cars, like there's parts of the car that are working the same, you know, barring electric cars and everything, but like an internal combustion engine now has the same parts as an internal combustion engine that's 50 years old. You know, they might be upgraded, they might be newer. And I mean, I say this as, so my dad's a baby boomer, obviously. He's a mechanical engineer, and he's like the head mechanical engineer for a power plant over in Tampa. And he's having this issue because he's trying to retire, but he's like the only person who knows how like half the stuff works. And so they're like desperately trying to keep him around. And in his specific industry, mechanical engineering, like a lot of the technologies and stuff that they're having, like, it's not an issue that, someone's older, and actually it's beneficial because he's seen all kinds of different, actual mechanisms versus like in, the IT sector. It's definitely like the internet is advancing at a huge pace. So.
Yeah, and that does. It sounds like she supports what you're saying. That with that knowledge, right? Yeah. There's great value that comes with it, and it's not easily replaced. So, I think in the right situation, someone who's older can have a huge advantage over someone that's younger. And I think you have to know where that applies and where it doesn't. I mean, let's if we're being completely transparent with this, we know that ageism exists. We know that will be applied in decision making, even though it shouldn't. And I've had enough comments made to me over the years of a nature that should not be spoken out loud or even thought of prospective clients saying things like, find me someone who's of this age, roughly. And of course, any good recruiter will shut that down quickly. But it's happened frequently enough for me to know that the thought is there, and it's a valid concern. So I think to be aware of it is the first step in overcoming it, and leveraging your experience over the lack thereof for younger people is a huge bonus for older people.
Yeah, I think you just have to put it as something in the forefront of your mind as you get older. To, like, say if you're in IT, say IT for specifically, and as you're getting older, like, you have to make an effort to constantly learn all the new things and to be updated to combat that, because things do advance at a fast pace. You can't just be like, I know everything as it is now in this small snapshot. 10 years from now, like, that's going to be, irrelevant. So you have to be evolving with the workplace. And if you do that, then it becomes almost an advantage, because you've seen where things were, and as they've moved forward, you can kind of think critically on new problems and where things are going from there.
And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I'll date myself by saying this, but you guys have heard me talk about this in terms of recruiting, that I think technology, generally speaking, has made recruiters not as good as they used to be, because you don't have to work as hard to build rapport in each individual relationship, because it's so much easier to access additional candidates. Where when I started recruiting pre-internet days, pre-Monster and Indeed and LinkedIn and all these sites that just flood recruiters with resumes now, I don't think that's improved the process. And I could make a pretty strong case that it's hindered it for both candidates and the companies who are hiring, but specifically it's made recruiters, it's all a big crutch. And so if you take all those tools away, you have to elevate your game in order to survive. And so I think older workers have seen a lot, done a lot, and had to work through harder times to achieve the same level of results. So I'm a fan of hiring older people, of course. And I think if you're letting age get in the way of a hiring decision, you're certainly doing it wrong, very wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
Totally agree.
All right, so anything else with the baby boomers before we get to the generation that everyone loves most?
The forgotten generation.
Forgotten generation. Well, I mean, forgotten because we don't have a target on our back for anything. But I mean, for Gen X, I mean, I'll let you guys take a shot. What do you think the concerns are for those who are in Gen X?
Honestly, a lot of the things we talked about with the baby boomers are going to be the same, because frankly, half the baby boomers, they're retiring at this point. So now, when this was the thing, like, baby boomers talk about it 10 years ago, this is where Gen Z is, or Gen X is now. You guys are either you're in the thick of your career, in the peak, earning years, so to speak, or they're starting to advance to the part where a lot of people, on the older end, are starting to think about retirement. It's not that far off. It's not, something that's like way, I'll worry about that later. So technology advancing, it's huge. That's something I think that's going to be only a bigger issue in the coming years. And ageism, definitely stagnation in your career, getting stuck and just like sitting there and being like, hey, I'm in my job right now, and not considering, do you want to move forward, or are you happy, at your position now? It kind of depends.
And maybe not even being able to retire as soon as the boomers. I feel like that's something I've heard.
That's something that I think a lot of my generation that I've talked to, like, going forward, it seems like it's getting pushed back more and more. I mean, people are living longer, like health is, getting better, so to speak. So that's kind of a huge thing, job security. Where's the world going, type of thing.
Well, and people who are on a fixed income and retired right now are dealing with inflation in a significant way, right? Interest rates just hit 8% on home purchases. I mean, we haven't seen those kind of numbers in decades. So I think that certainly adds to what you just said about needing to retire later, and that's going to change a lot of plans for many people. I think also, I know I'm a little past this, but there's a reality to what we talked about a few minutes ago, where you can't be as flexible when you have children that you're responsible for, and you have to be present. And you guys, don't have kids. I'll say yet, but you don't have kids, and I will say that I'm shocked. I'm not shocked anymore because I've been experiencing it for so long. But there's so many things that schools expect you to be there for during business hours and to be present. And I don't recall that at all growing up. I mean, if my parents ever attended anything during the day at school, I have no recollection of it. But now there's things regularly scheduled during the day, and that's a real challenge. So you can choose, you're going to be a bad parent or you're going to be a bad employee, and everybody wants to be good at both. So those are real concerns, and I'll say limitations maybe for people in Gen X and a lot of millennials now too, of course. I mean, I would lump millennials into that as sort of the
definitely. I mean, if you cut 2 kids at home and you got a mortgage and everything, you might all of a sudden get a great job offer. It's on the other side of the country, and it would be on paper great for your career, great to learn all this stuff. But like, are you really going to drop everything, sell your house, and pull your kids out of school, move to the other side of the country? Like, that's not something that's feasible for somebody who's established. And I'd say that's probably the biggest concern is, you cannot do what's maybe the best thing for your career. You got to look at where you live. You got to look at the schools. You got to look at all that type of stuff.
And I feel like, let's just say you're switching career paths and, you have to go your way up. If you have like family and you're at home, there's like distractions. You're probably trying to work longer hours to get ahead of everything. It's probably more difficult to even have like that career advancement.
Yeah. Or you got to switch say you want to switch careers, and you got to, you're like, hey, I'm going to go back to, I got to go back to school for 2 years to learn this. And forbid that's a thing, because that's a whole other thing. Like, can you really take 2 years off and be supported while you change plans? Whereas somebody who's maybe in their mid-20s, that's not that big a deal. Like, they can make it work and, maybe find something part-time or whatever and completely pivot their entire career way easier than somebody who's in their mid-50s.
I mean, unless your kids are in college and you're obviously like home and it's just like,
yeah, because if you're past it, it kind of comes back around, but
So let me ask you guys, I mean, since you don't have kids, you can weigh in on this in a way that you're not biased at all. How empathetic should employers be about that? And I'll give you the scenario. Let's say employee A doesn't have kids and is free to do things nights, evenings, weekends, whatever it takes. And then you have employee B who has obligations. They have to leave early on occasion. They have to cut out to do things. They can't go to happy hours and dinners the same way. Is it okay to do you think that the employee A gets rewarded for all the time that they can spend, those extra things? There's a reality to it, I think. But what's your take on that?
That's a tough one. Should they be? They shouldn't. I mean, I could go on a whole other thing about how, like, society should make it easier and better to, you know, raise your kids and everything, because that's going to be the future generations and all that, you know, type deal. But if you're looking at it from a purely employer's perspective, they should be both treated the same. But if one is able to, you know, let's say it's a sales role, one is able to network more, one is able to build those relationships, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's going, you know, the person that's always around, that's making friends with people, they are going to be thought about more, you know, take it as you will, like, than the person who's never around because they've got. And I guess that's just something you have to choose, like, in your career, you know, is your family more important or your career? And it shouldn't be that way, I know, but that's the fact of the matter in a lot of places.
But you said it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way according to whom?
According to the world should be, you know, people should be treated for just, you know, for their work, rather than you doing a bunch of extra stuff that's not necessarily part of your job.
Well, I mean, you're saying that the person who's going above and beyond shouldn't be rewarded for it. I think the person going above and beyond may have issue with that.
Yes, if they're going above and beyond for job related things, yes. But if I think, you know, if you're talking about, say, a happy hour, and it's not a sales role, it's just purely a networking type thing. You know, getting FaceTime with your managers or whatever. That's not part of your job if you're a data analyst or something like that. But it's definitely going to benefit you if, you know, people outside your department know who you are, and, you know, you make friends with, you know, other people. Like, that's how you get ahead in life. I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Well, so I mean, for some reason, I end up bring up Elon Musk in situations like this, maybe because he makes his personal life public in some respects, but he's known for sleeping in the office and working 24/7. I read a quote not too long ago. I think he said he only takes one day off a year, or something crazy like that, right? And you look at the output, and certainly, you know, the results are there to a significant degree. You don't become the richest person in the world by accident, right?
We could argue that he makes the choice then to work instead of being a good father.
Correct. So there you go. So you could say, does Elon not deserve? Yeah, did he not earn it? Yes. Did he make sacrifices? Yes. But that's the inverse could be true, right? You can make those sacrifices at work to be a better parent, to be a better spouse, to be more involved in your community, whatever it might be. And I don't think those things should be, there's no solving those, right? It's just the reality of the situation, right? I could be, I
don't think it's necessarily bad, by the way. Like, if you're like making that conscious decision, you're like, this is just what's more important to me. Like, it's not, I think it's not one's the right one, one's the wrong one. You know,
I mean, you could still balance both. I feel like you can still work really, really hard and try to move your way up at your job. Then I feel like you can also be a good parent on the side. I feel like nowadays we just found like a balance, or we're still trying to find it.
For sure. Yeah. The right company is obviously going to play a huge part in it. And if you're in the wrong company, maybe, like, you know, look around for what's out there. It's never been an easier time to find another job, to find another career. You know, shameless plug for ZenGig, but I mean, there's tons and tons of different options out there available to you. And just like we talked about, you know, all the tools available for recruiters, there's tons of tools available for candidates now too. So,
and I feel like a lot of companies nowadays also acknowledge the balance. You know, they still want their employees to work really hard, but they also want them to be good parents. So,
yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, people who have a happy life outside of work are more focused and productive while they're at work. So that goes hand in hand. And we've all been in a situation where we have personal things going on in our lives distracting us, and we know we're not as focused on the job or whatever our tasks are when that happens. So that balance is a great thing. But I don't think we're going to solve that particular challenge. I don't think it needs to be solved. I think everyone has to make individual choices. And the person who wants to sleep on their couch, they're probably going to be produce more than the person who cuts out every day at 5.
I mean, well, I think that work-life balance piece and being tied to, you know, your home life versus like work, that is the quintessential, I feel like right now, like Gen X struggle, because Gen X is what they're in their 50s and like 40s. Is that kind of the range where they're like, that's the age where you've got kids that are like from young to like teenagers. And, that's where like people have been in their job, maybe 20 years at this point. They've still got 10 to 20 years maybe to go. You're like right in the middle of it. So yeah, that work-life balance part, I think.
Well, and the whole working from home then continues to be a drama that's unfolding, right? Companies requiring employees to come back, employees fighting against that. I ran into some old neighbors, my wife and I did on Friday night when we were out, and ended up joining them for dinner. And the topic of me working at home now, working virtually, came up, and they looked at my wife and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. How is that going?" And I'm like, wow, okay, so they thought like that's a terrible thing that you're working from home.
Is that like that's like the boomer humor? Like, my wife hates me. Like, I'm the dumb husband. Like,
and this couple happens to get along extremely well. I mean, they're wonderful and with each other, but it just seemed like such a foreign concept to them. The thought that of me being home and that being, I guess, too close for comfort. I don't know, but
I mean, I could see where it could be a struggle. Like, I know people where they're both working from home and they just had to separate their desks from each other because they were driving each other crazy. But as long as you have your designated workspaces that are separate from each other, I feel like, that's fine. But like,
I guess that's the type of person. Like, I know plenty of people that are like, I love hanging out with my girlfriend or my wife or whatever. Like, seeing her and like getting to eat lunch together. Like, I hear people talk about it all the time. So like, I don't know. I guess that's a relationship type thing. If you can't stand to be around the person for that long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to each their own, right? So, all right, let's tackle the millennials. The millennials have no issue whatsoever. What can you think of that were the millennials? I think the millennials are the age that everyone in a perfect world, it's kind of the perfect candidate, right? You have enough experience, but you're not too set in your ways. You're kind of at the peak of your career and advancement. I mean, what's
the biggest struggle that I've kind of seen is obviously a lot of people is the debt portion and kind of when we entered the job market. I mean, when millennials really entered in kind of 2008 was when we started kind of going into the job market. Not a great time. It's obviously rebounded a lot now. I know we're seeing, there's been just a kind of throughout my entire career, a lot of say turmoil in the job market, a lot of changes. COVID was a huge thing. So I think that's been kind of the biggest hindrance is almost a false start. I feel like for a lot of people where they're not starting out exactly maybe on their best foot, maybe the same, in the same situation that somebody from say Gen X or even, the baby boomers started out. That's been a kind of a huge thing. And it seems kind of like the external factors have formed a lot of the issues. Job hopping is, I know a lot of millennials are known for, but if you got laid off during COVID and, these companies were hiring at these crazy rates and stuff, and you left for a higher, and I know we've talked about this on previous shows, higher salary, that's going to affect you too. So a lot of these things kind of go hand in hand. So those are the things I see the most, at least the millennials that I know.
Do you think that millennials have like high expectations? They want to like rapidly advance in their careers. Think it's going to happen in like 1, 2?
Yeah, I think that's a millennial and a Gen X thing. I'll say a digital age thing. People who've been around, who kind of came up with social media and with kind of being connected to each other and being more comfortable with technology and the internet and, remote work and stuff. That we've had entire episodes of this, and we could have entire, other episodes where we talk about people's expectations being conflated with their peers, and not even just their peers that they work with, but peers, people you don't even know on the other side of the country, where you're seeing like their best life, and you're like, well, how come this person's a CEO at age 25? Like I should be, getting a raise really fast. And that's kind of that's definitely a thing for millennials, and I'd say Gen Z probably as well. And maybe all.
You said Gen X, you meant Gen Z though, right?
Yeah, Gen X, younger generations.
Okay. Because I was going to say, we don't have the high expectations that your generation has.
Yeah. No, it's the people who grew up on social media and seeing the one the person who's like 1 in a million who's like, I got a promotion here and I was a director and I was a vice president or whatever, and I'm 33 years old and I'm the senior vice president of some big company, and then you kind of take that internally, and now you have millennials who are like, well, I've worked here for a year. Like, why am I not getting promoted right away? So I definitely think that's a expectation management is a thing for my.
Yeah, I saw a meme. I wish I had downloaded it to share today, but it said, millennials born too late to buy a house and too early to commute to work on Mars.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, and that's your generation too, Ashley. I mean, that's becoming, you need a certain level of income to live a middle class lifestyle right now, and that level is significantly higher as a percentage than it was 20 and 30 and 40, 50 years ago. So that is a real challenge right now, where you have to, when we're bringing it to the context of job search limitations, you may not be qualified, or there may not be jobs available paying what you need in order to live a comfortable lifestyle. And so that's a tough thing for
if you're like, hey, I see this job and it's great, and I know if I work here for 2 years I'll get the experience, I can move, but it's a big pay cut and everything is expensive and only getting more expensive, like I can't. So that's kind of where you're like, man, what do I do? Like, do I take a pay cut and like try and scrimp and get by and maybe move back home with my parents or whatever for a couple of years to then maybe bounce back? But like, not everyone can do that, and that's a real thing. Is you can't buy a house on just like a random janitor salary like you could maybe when you were a baby boomer.
I'll say, even with like Gen Z, if you go, we're all basically early in our career, we're getting out of college, or we're just getting our first job, or we're still in college. You go job search to look for early career, and it's like unlivable. It's not, you can't buy a house with what you're going to get paid. So it's, especially since we're still trying to learn and build those skills, it's going to take us years till we get to that level where we can actually afford like the middle class life.
Do you think that I know now we're kind of getting into Gen Z, the like economic uncertainty is kind of affecting you guys to the same degree, where you're like, you guys came into the career in your careers in COVID. You're like, who knows? Like, I'm getting these once in a lifetime things every other year, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, even during COVID, like everyone was basically, on unemployment and struggling to find jobs. And I feel like even now, so with all these layoffs happening and everyone coming out of college, it's still pretty prevalent, I think. So
yeah, the layoffs that we're seeing, and particularly in the tech industry, and just like through this whole year, and kind of the, I'll say, economic downturn that we're like kind of in, just with the job and going into next year, I think that's definitely affecting the Gen Z people that I know. Like, they're kind of worried a little bit, just to be kind of blunt. So I think that's probably a huge factor in Gen Z and in millennials as well. So
yeah, I mean, these are uncertain times, to say the least. A lot going on in the world, and a lot going on with our job market right now. We see, one hand, big numbers reported of job growth and payroll increase month over month, but then you see other numbers that say, the payroll increased because people were taking second jobs, which is not a good thing, or layoff reports like the ones we've seen this week. So it's an uncertain time, and that's not a fun thing to be in when you're a job seeker, right? Because employers right now are hesitant to make big hiring decisions. I mean, we're seeing that a lot in the staffing industry, and that's a message that is being shared, with my peers across the country when I speak with them. So I know that is that's a reality that everyone's having to deal with. But I think that transcends each generation right now. I think for younger people in particular who haven't established a network and a reputation and history, it does make it harder when you're starting from scratch to find a job. I think the farther along you go in your career, most jobs aren't kind of that starting from scratch mode anymore. You go to your network, you build on your reputation and rely on that rather. So it makes job searching a whole lot easier.
It seems like the entry level jobs are like all the entry level jobs are like 2 years experience. You're like, what's going on? Like you start the job market like already with 2 years experience with the technology that came out like last year. So, yeah, it's the expectations are kind of all over the place. But speaking of kind of uncertainty and COVID and everything, I know we've kind of like we've talked about this in the past with Gen Z, particularly their soft skills and their networking skills. Like, how do you think that that's going to affect Gen Z going forward? Is not having those relationships. Through my career, even before working at Fourth Corner, like a lot of the stuff was a guy knows a guy and introduced me to a recruiter. So it was like that type of thing. It wasn't, to be honest, I never just cold applied to job postings. It was always like I knew someone and I was like, hey, can you get my name in front of this person? Like that's kind of how I got jobs. It was knowing somebody who knows somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like nowadays that's still, I mean, you got to use LinkedIn. You got to make as many connections as possible, reach out to people, try to build that like rapport with them, or like tap into your friends, tap into family members, because you never know, like, especially if you're actively job seeking and you're having a tough time, there's bound to be at least one connection out there where you can at least get your foot in the door and start talking to them and put yourself out there.
I think it's an excellent point and goes to one of the concerns that I have with working virtually. That's one of the cons for sure. You don't have the same natural opportunity to expand your network. Friendships become lasting things that you make it work. And yes, you can do it virtually. Now I love LinkedIn for the ability to make connections, but that takes a lot of time and effort to do. And it just doesn't happen, for lack of a better way to put it, like I said, naturally, like it used to. So if you are a young professional or even a millennial, which you're still young professionals when you're my age, that and you were working virtually, please make an effort to not just stay at home and get out in the world, join groups, trade associations, whatever it is that you're interested in that can be good for your profession and career. Make an effort to do it, because it's just not the same if you're only relying on virtual networking.
Yeah, you got to choose to do it.
Yeah, I'll be honest too. You got to kind of, I mean, it's probably harder for more introverted people, but if you're an extrovert and you're out in the world, like try not being on your phone as much, because you never know what conversations you can have with like a stranger. Like the other day I was at the airport and there were these two older women near me and they were like retired. One was 80 and the other was 60, traveled all around the world. And I asked them, I was like, what do you do? And one of them said like she was a VP of this, I'm not going to name the company because of, personal reasons, but she was like a VP. And I was like talking to her about that. And then the other one, I think she worked for another like big company and was like pretty in there, so long term, and then they finally retired, got to travel to Africa, Ireland, so many cool places. So if I was on my phone, I wouldn't be able to like meet them, make connections, talk to them, get them to like know who I am. So it's kind of a thing that we have to do now and just have to like put like effort in.
It's like a social muscle. You gotta use it. Everyone's got social anxiety now, and I think because of like it's so easy to just hide behind a screen, and so you don't talk to people, and then because you don't talk to people, you get more anxious. So it's like a vicious cycle,
Yeah, especially Gen Z, since we're we are not experiencing the office life. We're just remote. We're home. We're lonely. It's not going to help become more extroverted. It's probably going to make us more introverted. So it's best to just go and try to communicate with as many people in the outside world, person to person, as you can.
But you use the magic word, Ashley. That's put forth effort, right?
Yeah.
So no one can do that for you. You have to be willing to take those steps and opportunities are there and the reward comes with it. I truly believe that. But you gotta be willing to do it. So let me ask you guys what you think about this. Affects millennials and Gen Z. Now, I brought this up last week when we had a guest on, and then we backed off of the subject because but I don't mind bringing this up with you guys. How limiting is it for your generation who insists? There's a lot of people who will insist on their employer's social stance on topics, their employer having a social stance on a lot of polarizing topics. And we don't have to get into the details of those. We all kind of know what some of those are. But to me, that is taking, if we live in a country that's kind of split down the middle, right? On any, on most things lately, it seems. So if you take a stance, you're effectively cutting out opportunity to work for half the employers out there, if that's important to you. So it makes an already tough situation 50% worse, right? I mean, what do you guys, do you think, or is this just me not having a realistic grasp on how important that is to younger people?
I mean, I guess it depends on the person. I know with Gen Z, it's important to a lot of Gen Zers, and if they want to put themselves in that position and they know, the risks that come with it, like if you want to find an employer that has a specific stance and they don't, and you're not okay with working with them, then that's on you, because you can't expect them to change just because of what you think. I feel like everyone can think what they want universally, and it should just be like kept out.
I think you're overestimating how far companies are going. You're saying like, oh, you're self-selecting yourself out of 50%. I would say maybe you're saying, all right, I'm not going to work for maybe a fifth. Like there's a fifth on either end, and then 3 fifths are in the middle that are just kind of whatever.
Well, 3 scenarios, right? Taking a stance on one side, taking a stance on the other side of the issue, or not taking a stance at all. And what I'm counting are people who expect or even insist their employer is willing to take a stance. I think that is probably because most companies don't weigh in on political or polarizing social issues. I don't think. I mean, rightfully so. But if you're an employee who kind of wants that, and I think that is something that and who knows, I don't know how prevalent it is. I guess that's
it's important to a certain degree. It's definitely more important than previous generations for millennials and Gen Z and younger generations. I don't think it's to the point where it's like I wouldn't work for this company if they unless they're doing something that's way out of what you agree with. But I kind of view it, if you're going to say, well, I won't work with this company because of X reason. I view it the same as I won't live in, I don't know, Akron, Ohio because I don't like Ohio. You're making a conscious decision to be okay, well, I recognize that I'm slightly limiting myself, or I'm going to get paid slightly less because of that. So just I'll only work at companies that are remote, or I'll only work at companies that provide, employer paid for health insurance. It's just another one of those things, I think. So that's kind of how I see most.
But that probably is the biggest challenge of that Gen Z has in the job market, is putting these expectations or demands in place that didn't exist in the not too distant past. I will only want to work remotely. Okay, well, all right. Well, now you just cut down a big percentage of jobs. If you put a social stance in there as a requirement, now you've reduced it even further. So if you're not more flexible, you're going to have a tough time, self-imposed tough time in some respects. Which
you've only got so much resources. You can put it all into these things you care about, but then you're not leaving any over here. That's kind of how I view it. You can't have everything. You can have if you look at a big, it's 5 pieces or whatever. You can have 3 of those 5 type of deal.
Yeah.
And right now, I think a lot of the other kind of thoughts. I'm thinking, all right, why would the youngest generation struggle? Well, when layoffs start to occur, a lot of times companies will cut their newest employees out of loyalty to individuals, or Peter, some of the things you were saying earlier, the older employees aren't as easy to replace. They may have bigger salaries, but they have a lot more depth of knowledge too. So it's often easier to cut newer employees when you're doing layoffs.
Yeah, especially since I feel like the older employees, they've been through training, and newer employees, little training, and incoming ones will probably be at the same level when they decide to rehire again. So
Yeah, I can get rid of the junior developer right out of school. I can't get rid of the guy who like wrote the backbone of the program. Like,
Right.
yeah,
And you can pass on additional responsibilities to the manager of the group, right? But
yeah,
the brand new employee can't take on those senior responsibilities. It just doesn't work in reverse. So,
yeah.
so not, every generation has their issues. We're not getting any comments today, man. Des gave us some comments, or maybe it's our 5 o'clock recording. We got to get our audience familiar with our new time slot. But if you're out there listening, if there's something else that you wanted to chime in on, we'll hang for a few more minutes. Otherwise, I think we've kind of covered this topic pretty well.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that this is kind of one that a lot of people are like. I don't think anything we're saying is like news to people. I think it's kind of a, this is kind of prevalent across the board. These different challenges. So.
Yeah, they're probably just learning and listening right now as they're driving home, listening to our pleasant voices.
The people.
There it is. All right. Well, anything else, you guys, or should we cut a little short today and sign off?
I guess we're good. If we're not getting any comments, we're good.
All right, Ashley,
Right.
Peter, goodbye
All
for
right.
now. We'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure. See you guys.
Bye.